All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the More Sibyl Podcast. This is your host, Mo, and I'm super glad to reintroduce this person to the podcast. She is faculty at the Western New England University College of Pharmacy. She's also a senior colleague of mine. She's a researcher in health outcomes and pharmacy practice. She's an avid reader, a hiker, a thinker, and describes herself as a proud Russian. In the last episode, we talked about her life, academia, acculturation, problems, books that have impacted her life, childhood memories, and today will just be an extension of that. And last time she was on the podcast was about 3 years ago when Ayomide was one of the co-hosts. So I'll be winging it today, and I hope to do justice to her story. So everyone, please join me in welcoming back Dr. Natalia Shcherbakova to the podcast. Hello.
Hello. Nice to be here again.
Welcome back. And I said 3 years ago. It was actually 2 years ago. So it's been 2 years since the last time you were on the podcast. What's new with you, by the way? And how are you doing today?
Well, I think all the descriptions that were provided earlier for me still hold. So I'm still a faculty at Western New England University College of Pharmacy, and enjoy reading and hiking. So have a bunch of books stacked up for the holiday season to be read, and very excited to be a guest here.
If I recall, you like physical books, right?
Yes, my books are predominantly hard copies. So I do get some audiobooks from our library on CDs, right? I still enjoy CDs.
Yeah.
So I plug them into my car, and on my commute, I do audiobooks, which is also fun. But in the home environment, no, the only reading I do is holding an actual hard copy.
Okay. So what book are you reading currently?
So currently I'm reading the book called Ethically Challenged. So that's a book about private equity takeover of American healthcare. Not only healthcare, but other businesses as well, right? So essentially plundering of America by these companies. And the other book I just picked up and started actually yesterday evening. It's called Fantasyland. So myths that outside people have about America. So it's also very curious reading. And the other, obviously I have some other books that are sort of on the back burner sitting around. I'm still in the progress of finishing Story of Civilization on volume 7, the Will Durant book. I'm reading a little bit of Dostoevsky, his diaries. So Fyodor Dostoevsky is called The Diary of the Writer. So it's kind of, intermixing those as well.
Just a little light reading for you. Look at all those books, heavy books.
Dostoevsky is not.
That's what I said. I was being sarcastic with that.
Right. No, it's very engaged reading. You're like really impressed by the structure and
deep philosophical thinking. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. A bit of a wild curve here. So I'm sure you're aware of the UnitedHealthcare CEO who was recently assassinated, and I know we don't know a lot about the motive behind the killings. So everything that we know right now are just, speculations from people on why he did it. But I'm curious, because when you talked about private equity takeover of Americans, what are your thoughts on just, the impact of this on healthcare? Do you think it's going to move the paradigm just a little bit, especially the impact it has on access for people? Because I feel like it was motivated by just pain. And what the person thought was an injustice that they had to right. And this person is proven innocent until proven guilty, by the way. So these are just speculations. Don't take my word for it at the time of this recording.
Well, I honestly have some, skepticism as to how likely it impact any change with regards to how insurance or healthcare insurance business works in this country. It's perhaps the only change I can foresee, and I believe it has been happening from what I read in the news as well, is many insurance companies started to hide who is their CEO, right?
Yeah.
Just for the protection and safety reasons. But obviously, if you're very interested, Securities and Exchange Commission will be your go-to source. And I'm sure the gentleman, right, this young man who assassinated the CEO, he would have been able to locate that information with SAC without necessarily having it somewhere in a more public view. That probably will be the main change. But other than that, again, reading this ethically challenged book with regards to how we have such a corporatized system in the first place, right? But also we have this firms, right? The PE firms, which, it's essentially a leveraged buyout, right? They buy companies, putting in only a small percentage of the cost, and then the rest is financed via debt. So the examples described in the book, like Hospital Corporation of America and a bunch of others, which were overburdened with debt and quality of care deteriorated, staffing reduced, but you have a handful of fat cats who are essentially eating up on that feast of millions of dollars of recap dividends and fees. And then when they sell the company, right, they make a really handsome amount of money, sometimes in the amount of billions, whereby leaving communities devastated. We have many examples, such as Toys R Us just a few years ago was destroyed completely, and that was through this leveraged buyout and putting on billions of debt on the company which was prosperous and had an opportunity to continue to exist. But just someone wanted to become uber rich, and voila, right? There is really regulation is nearly non-existent. So when Elizabeth Warren, right, the senator, introduced that Stop Wall Street Looting Act a few years ago at this point, there was a lot of uproar, right, among lobbyists who were actually courting the Congress and the politicians to stop it from implementation. So that's where it's your access capitalism, right? When the people outside of America think about the USA, right, they think this is, a democracy with lack of corruption and so forth. But in essence, right, corruption has just a new definition for it. It's called lobbying. But in essence, that is corruption. And it's so prevalent that, back to your question, I just don't think that assassination of a CEO of an insurance company can make a dent in, changing something.
Yeah, I agree with you. We can call it for what it is. No one should just go out there and commit like jungle justice on just anyone. That's how we have law and order in place. And the outcry so far, I started looking through Reddit posts and a lot of commentary by YouTube pundits, is also having that insight into the healthcare system, right? It's quite complex. It's profit-driven insurance model that really contributes to administrative waste, uncertainty for patients, and then high cost without significant return, in value. And I think that anger is what you see when people just say, I can say it's wrong to kill. Then they use their butts and then talk about, I had somebody who passed away because they were denied, insurance claims and all that. I hope that this will be a wake-up point. Sadly, someone's life was lost. Even though what he did, as far as him being a businessman, you can look at it like he was just trying to make money, right? That said, this was also a family person. He had loved ones who cared about him. So, but I really hope that this will be something that we can, it can really help change how we put value in human lives. Because I think that's a conversation that has not really been talked about a lot. So, yeah.
Yeah, of course. You can look at that issue at the very personal level, and that's a completely different evaluation than looking at, broader level at what likely motivated this young gentleman to commit this crime.
He's quite an enigma, from what I've read about his family. He comes from a very privileged background. Now he did suffer from many years of pain. Yeah, he had spondylitis, and he had a really, his back pain was so bad that it was difficult to even carry out his activities of daily living. That said, he was very privileged, went to UPenn, went to an all-prep middle school. His parents are super rich. His grandparents had real estates in Maryland. As a matter of fact, they've contributed a lot to universities and hospitals. So he doesn't fit for lack of a better word, he's good looking. He doesn't fit like all the profile of, people term like losers and nobodies or angry people. He doesn't fit that profile. And even looking through his internet trails, he was on Twitter, he was on Reddit, posting anonymously, but his posts were very mild, offering advice to people about surgeries, about pain, about coffee, just, regular dude that wasn't like an internet troll. So, he will be studied for a long time as to his motives and just why he did what he did. But I'm just curious to see the long-term conversation. But I feel like as someone who's lived here for the past 13 years, they tend to have a very short span memory. Before now, like something else to take over the news, and then we forget about him and forget about the man who was also killed along the way. And it's also like the next hot topic. People are just languishing, dying away. But that's a story for another day. Let's talk about this semester. How's it been like for you? And just, so you've been teaching now, you've been in academia now for almost a decade?
So if we don't count the PhD, I have been with the university where I can currently work 12 years at this point. So wow. I started in 2012, so I celebrated my 12th year in 2024, August 13.
Congratulations.
So that's, the semester has been pretty good. So obviously I'm teaching a couple of courses. One of them is where I have a writing assignment, a research paper for students. And last year, for this fall semester, there were some arising issues with regards to paper writing by students, right? And
AI.
The lure of, large language models to be used. And I actually assigned zeros to a handful of papers.
How did you know?
The references, right? The hallucinated references. Right, the non-existent ones. That was, there were about five students or so. So this semester at the start, back in August, I really composed a definitive passage with regards to you can use AI, but you have to first admit to using it, record which exact AI you used, as well as the prompt, as well as the output as attached to the supplement. And obviously I was scrutinizing the papers about 2 weeks ago or so with really anticipation that some students ignored that. I didn't have any, reporting they used, but I didn't locate the non-existent references. So I guess, there is likely some use, but obviously a more of educated, right? Whereby no longer. I ended up with giving a few Fs because the papers were incoherent and just didn't stand to criteria to even, get a passing grade. But there were a number of strong papers that appeared to be, didn't cause me to suspect that they were like a gibberish, right, produced by a machine.
It's funny you mentioned that. Even as someone in the same field as you, I'm beginning to see that for students, especially in these formative years of their life, that heavy reliance on AI. So I start off my semester. Number one, my syllabus is very clear. There's a portions of the course where I would want you to use AI to develop prompts and interventions based on these, particular topics. And I want to see your methods. And so how I do is that an assignment I give them particularly is as a public health and health policy class, right? I want you to come up with an intervention based on any topic of your choice. It's a group assignment. Now, put some prompts in it. I want to see how you refine your prompts, because with AI, what you put into it is, as best as what you get out of it. And then, so take, for example, they say, I want to create a diet to help a patient with high blood pressure, maximize, better outcomes. So you put that feed into it, and then whatever output the LLM brings out, compare that to standards placed by American Heart Association. And what are the gaps you, as the thinking science being, to see the gaps and fill it as a pharmacist. So it's not just looking at what they can feed into, but it's also that metacognitive skills they can apply as pharmacists. And that's the only time I allow them to use AI. There's only one reflection paper, and I know what AI looks like because I use it. I know what AI looks like. And I tell them in my syllabus, if you use AI beyond what I've allowed you to use, it's an outright F in the course. And that is you, it's plagiarism, it's dishonesty, and it's very clear in the course. Like if you use AI for that, I don't want to read a reflective paper from AI. I want you to, and the prompt I give them, no pun intended, is you've been taking this class now for almost 3 months. I want you to tell me what you've learned so far. Pull from all the classes. AI can write that for you. And I would know if it sounds generic. Now, I had some students try to bypass and they would take quotes from my slides and piece it together. It still didn't make sense. Of course, they got like a 5 out of 10. Like, I know what my slides are. I put them together,
Mm-hmm.
So, but I'm seeing that there's just, especially with the application, a lot of students seem to be struggling with application questions. They just want you to say A equals to B and tell me in your slide where I should study. But I want to see how you're applying those higher level thinking. But I'm curious to know, do you find that the same true for your students as well?
Yes, I actually have had a student who was struggling during the intermediate exams. I have within the course exam 1 and exam 2 as well as a final. So I reached out to the student to come to my office and sort of speak about her challenges, and then somehow to support her, I suggested to her to learn a few topics from which were covered in the past and then come next week to discuss them. So she came and I asked her the questions that was actually about drug pricing and benchmark used in drug pricing.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, I don't just ask definition, but more of explain how this particular benchmark stands in relation to others. And the response back, she was struggling to respond. And then she said, well, but in your slides, you didn't ask the same way. So I only learned and memorized from your slides. And now you're asking in different words. So I'm not really sure what you mean. And I was a little bit concerned with that response, to say the least, because, my forward question to her was, hey, do you read the textbook? No, she told me she doesn't read the textbook. And then the next question is, do you read in general? I was like, well, I only read, love novels, which is okay, right? Love novels aren't bad either. So, but the point is that, I feel like we are triangulating that the students want to have the cookie cutter answer from the slides, right? Or the cookie cutter question that, expanding and trying to correlate, some outside knowledge or think about it broader as to how it is applying to a particular topic or area. That skill is absent in many, not all obviously, but in many students. I feel like they are just getting handicapped by various tools that, spit out you something and you just take it and run with it without digesting or contextualizing or trying to critically assess it. So I had to call her back next week and try to prepare more. It was slightly better, but still, again, on the level of memorization from the slide.
I mean, I see that a lot. So, as you know, for the way we do, and thank you so much for sharing that, by the way. The way we do exams here, we tackle the objectives, and I don't know how you guys do it, but I imagine it's the same because of AACP and all that. AACP, for those who know, is the American Association of Colleges of Pharmacies, where they try to standardize pharmacy schools to make sure that students have a minimum standard of education, right? So we have, when you teach, you have objectives that should tag along with your teachings. And it's those objectives that you should also tag your questions with. So, and then you want them to have mastery in certain domains, right? So maybe an example, I teach public health. One could be knowing the comparative systems of other healthcare systems in the world relative to the US based on access, cost, and quality, right? That could be a learning objective. But then you want to use measurable learning objectives like, to describe, to analyze, and all that. I do a little bit of low level Bloom's, taxonomy, but I also push for the high, especially the application. And I'll tell you that maybe like out of 50 questions in an exam, I might have like 2 to 4 higher, level questions, assessing those analysis and all that. The percentage correct responses are usually very poor for those questions. The point by serial correlation, which are some of the statistics used if a question is doing very well in an exam. And then, and then we switched to a new learning management system where students can now put comments on the questions they find problematic. And you see things like, you didn't teach us this in class. And I'm like, no, Sherlock. Is implied, apply all the knowledge in, There's one particular question. I taught them quality of life and PRO, a very basic rudimentary level, because these are P2 students. You don't want to overwhelm them. Right. There's a question about if you had a PRO that was, which one would make you want to use this specific PRO versus a generic specific PRO? And it was, if you want to apply it to different populations or based on disease conditions. Natasha, it was so straightforward. Like, if you sat down in class and you listened to me talk about PROs and generic versus, you could apply and get that question right.
Mm-hmm.
It barely made the cut.
Slides.
It wasn't on the slide like XYZ, but you applied. Mm-hmm. How can we best prepare our students for those high level? Because that's one of my worries. Application questions. That's one of my worries.
That's where I honestly feel, one of the strategies, at least, I'm not sure how easy it is to implement, but probably we can all try is to, at least add a number of questions that are essay-based, right, or short response or sentences. That really gives you an assessment of what's there in the head as opposed to A, B, C, D, and picking a correct answer with 25% probability of success rate on each question, just by chance. So, which is not possible if you ask, a descriptive answer. So I do believe that honestly it is tough to grade those questions and from a time investment standpoint. But at least in my master's courses, the data analysis course I teach, it's relatively small, right, graduate level course. So I do incorporate a number of writing questions, and those give me a lot of insight. What is that in the head of the students? And I feel like those allow to also, get the students think versus, that guess game of multiple choice. That's one of the strategies. And the second one, inspiring as much as possible to read. So that's where I personally force reading. It used to be I had assigned reading, but obviously no one reads assigned reading. But now I have take home associated with an assigned reading.
Unless it's going to come out in the exam, they're not going to read it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a take home quiz that I get, some small amount of points. But if you complete all take home quizzes, you get a good share of the total points captured. So, and obviously, perhaps they are using some of them, the AI to help answer the quiz questions, but hopefully some still, honestly read it. And that way, reading is one of the best tools to learn. So when you have at least, a motivation, right? Okay, I can get those 5 points and they add up and I complete the reading and I'll then answer the quiz. My thinking is that is in part also can help, right? Expand that working with material and really critically thinking about it.
Those are very great points to go with, and I appreciate you sharing that. I feel like with the example you gave of maybe doing open-ended questions in essays, I'll tell you that most colleges of pharmacy will say, no, it's very hard for you to create a rubric on how you can grade that because responses will vary. As a matter of fact, for all of our questions for the exams, they have to be multiple choice questions. It wasn't even recently they brought back the K-type questions. We couldn't even do K-type questions until they realized that NAPLEX does that. Now we have to start doing. So K-types are those matching questions,
Okay.
Yeah, But for my classroom, one thing I've been doing to push the envelope a little bit is It's bringing back some of these old school techniques, like, for example, the Socratic questioning techniques to really challenge their underlying beliefs, encourage just deeper thinking. But the problem is that most of them don't like talking in class, and you can't call out students and say, hey, you answer the question, because God help you, you call out a student by name to answer questions. Guess what you're going to get at the end of the semester? She gave me anxiety because she called out my name during class.
Right.
So it's like, how can you even win? I've also tried concept mapping, just helping them, to even create those maps to help visualize concepts. What are that? Problem-based learning, because my class being public health I'm never short of new materials. There's always something happening in other parts of the world, not just the US. And we can, present them with those real world problems and how they can apply their knowledge to find solutions. Even debates, I've divided my class into two groups, We've talked about universal health coverage, pro and con. This year was about AI using pharmacy practice, pros and cons. So yeah, that's what I try to do, my little parts to just make a little dent in there. I hope that by the time they're done with my course, their world is a bit larger and they're able to transfer those skills beyond pharmacy school. But I'll tell you that it's worrisome for me, the way students just feel like, or for me, the goal is even to pass an exam. And I'm like, I'm trying to prepare you for the outside world where exams don't really matter. It's much about how can you ask the right questions, right? And how can you apply those deep cognitive skills? I want to expand your world. I want to blow your mind, literally, Let me help you.
Oh, that's a noble objective for sure. But I guess that the paper, right? I added this assignment when I came to this course. There was another faculty who taught it that left, and then there was a dean of student affairs, our former dean, who taught it within this course, right? And he had another assignment, like a group project, which I substituted with this writing assignment, individual research paper. Obviously, from a grading standpoint, it's a lot of time. I spent at least 2 to 3 days reading the papers and grading them. And at some point, it crossed my mind, hey, can I simplify my job and get rid of it? But at the same time, I'm thinking, well, if I get rid of it, then I will remove any opportunity for the student to, as you were saying, to expand their horizons, at least in one topic of the course, which I give them the option to pick a topic from a list, or even a topic that's not on my list with consultation. So some students pick something that they are passionate about. That wasn't something that I was suggesting to write, and papers were reasonably well written and thought through. So obviously to write, you have to read. And I decided to stick and persevere. So I will not remove the writing research paper assignment. It will be there for this very reason, right? To get away from multiple choice and that, tunnel thinking.
Keep it if you can. And I also try to think about the students as well. Whenever I get them, it's a very busy, confusing time of the year for them. And my class is not the only class they're taking, and they're being pulled from different angles. A lot of them are not well regulated, and it's also trying to see that, okay, you can't do a lot before you overwhelm their system, and they just take that out on you. So it's also trying to balance what their needs and preferences and the unique experiences they have. Because, some of them are parents, they have kids, they have responsibilities, trying to juggle school. It's not quite easy, but hey, we'll keep moving. Thanks for sharing that. So you're from Russia, like you were born in Russia, moved to the US, and I know you still have ties with Russia. I'm curious to know, compared to the US, what are some of the, would you say, the differences you see among the education system in light of what we just talked about? If you were in Russia, what would be different for you as far as if you're practicing what you're doing right now in Russia? And what problems do you think you might be having in Russia relative to what you're, going through here?
Well, I guess, if we are speaking about higher education, then I think obviously I have some colleagues of mine who I keep in touch with, who are faculty and roughly doing the same things that I'm doing here, at least in my alma mater, the Perm State Pharmaceutical Academy that I went to. I have a good colleague who is associate professor there and teaching somewhat similar subjects to myself. I think the workload is definitively higher. So she teaches roughly 900 hours per academic year. So that translates to 20 hours of classroom teaching per week, as opposed to slightly around 5 hours of teaching per week in the US, right? And that's my teaching load comparable to many faculty teaching loads in our school or elsewhere. So 5 hours of teaching a week versus 20 hours of being in the classroom, that's quite a difference. And that difference stems from the fact that in Russia, when I was a student, as well as currently, you have lectures, right? And then you have seminars that are associated with every course or labs. So essentially, a course like mine, where I only have 2 credit hours and am in the classroom for 2 hours a week, would be associated with also seminars where students are broken down in groups of 10 to 15.
Oh, wow.
And there will be if it's 100 student cohort, then it will be roughly 10 groups, right? That seminars has to be led. So that means that clearly the workload would be substantially increased. With regards to expectations for research, they're roughly similar. Despite such a higher workload, faculty in Russian higher education institutions are still expected to publish, right? Do research and publish. And that, with high teaching load can be challenging. But actually, a colleague of mine and myself, we collaborated a few years ago on a project that we presented at a few conferences in Russia. So she is still able to maintain good research output, writing output, to meet the requirements. Expectations for grants could be probably depend on the type of institution. Maybe some schools in the capital in Moscow have higher expectations than schools in other cities further away from the capital. Also discipline specific. Just like here, right? Humanities, social sciences, lower, expectations than STEM disciplines for grantsmanship. But other than that, I feel it could be very similar. Just some nuances related to logistics. Higher load, right? Higher presence with students. But everything else conceptually is roughly would be the same.
So, 900 hours per academic year, that's a lot of difference, by the way. What's the dynamic between professors and students in Russia compared to what it's like for you, your perception of that in the US?
Granted, I haven't taught, right, in Russia in a higher education institution. I did, I think, once an invited talk at my alma mater, just talking about higher education, pharmacy education in the US. That was the topic. And that was on Zoom. But I felt like the questions the students asked at the end of the talk were just something that you would expect students would ask here. So obviously you have young people who are highly motivated to learn. And given that it was an invited talk, you didn't have to attend it. So I assume there is some selection bias present as to who showed up, right? But I felt among those who showed up, they were pretty comparable to the US students. But you may have some, just like in the US, right? You have stronger students, more intellectually curious, and you have students who are focused on passing, right, and getting their coveted diploma at the end of the schooling period.
Okay. So that was your experience as a guest lecturer for that particular time. But as a student, casting your mind back when you did your pharmacy school in Russia, what was the relationship like with your professors, contrasting that to how students in the US relate with you now?
Yeah, so I feel it is roughly comparable. So I was working on a research graduation project in my 5th year of pharmacy program, and I feel like the attention I received from my advisor for this project was very similar as that you would get here, right? It was comparable to a master's level thesis of sorts. And I have to say that we met with my advisor on a regular basis, discussed ideas, she recommended readings. So from that interaction standpoint, it could be similar. So the only perhaps difference is, at least in my courses that I teach in the US, I use a number of peer-reviewed reading assignments for students, write scientific articles. And when I was in pharmacy school, for some reason, I don't recall, right, in regular courses, not the thesis course, that I was expected, right, to read literature and write literature review and so forth. In other courses, I haven't been exposed a lot, right, to scientific articles, and that's where I motivate a colleague of mine, right, who is working in my alma mater as associate professor, to incorporate, right, reading from articles that are in the scientific literature, to also expand the horizons of students for careers they can take, right, and perhaps motivate them to pursue graduate school. That's what I feel could be potentially added, and I feel like, in some universities that's likely already being done and adopted.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for sharing that. Appreciate that. So you've been in academia now for, you said 14 years, 12 years?
12 years, yeah.
12 years, yeah. And that's congratulations, by the way. That's that's a long time. And and we've kind of hinted at this, sometimes your goal as a professor might not align with your institutional goals. And even your cultural differences can come at play in how you see the world and how you want to bring that into the classroom. Then even adjusting for students' expectations. What would you say are some of the skills you think future academics like you need to have to be able to survive our workplace? Because the job we do isn't easy. It's not for the faint-hearted, right? What are some of the things they need to know before they consider going into academia, especially in a U.S. environment?
That's a good question. I guess, well, first you should be interested, right, to be an academician, right, to teach and do research. There is something related to, perhaps for some people, public speaking anxiety may be a deterrent factor, because you do stand up in front of the audience. We currently have fewer students that we used to be, but still, right, it's roughly 25 to 30 students that you sort of, present in front of. So that is an important skill, right, to be comfortable to do public speaking and confident in what is that you are conveying to the audience. But that is an acquired skill. So you clearly remember our Toastmasters club where we practiced public speaking, and I felt like being a member of that club helped me a lot to speak in front of the audience. So when I made up my mind to become faculty, at least, the fear of public speaking was under control with all the practice that I acquired publicly speaking as a member of the Toastmasters Club. So, but other than that, I think I generally treat my students with respect and on the level of colleagues, right? They are my young colleagues, right? In a few years, that will be just like, myself. So essentially, the tone of the conversation is collegial as opposed to be, I'm here, a wise person, right? Sort of, talking down to them. No, I try not to adopt that tone. So, and collegiality is something that I feel is appealing to any audience, right? When you are being treated as equal and your opinion is being sought. So that's another, I think, approach that could make a young faculty successful in a teaching environment. So, I think those two, comfort with public speaking and respect to your audience, I mean, they are very self-explanatory and basic.
And thanks for sharing that, by the way. You're right. It didn't really dawn on me that public speaking skills was one of the things that you needed to have to survive this job. And Toastmasters, like you said, had prepared me because you have to stand in front of students, sometimes doing it 2 to 3 times a week to deliver effective presentations. And students can see right through you. If you're not very impactful or you stumble on your words, you just don't seem very, very effective. Oh, they're gonna, take that as a vulnerability spot. Thanks for that reminder. So public speaking skill, what else, what are the additional skills we need to have to be able to survive this?
Well, I mean, obviously the interest in the courses you teach is instrumental. And it's very helpful to, hopefully a new faculty who starts is assigned courses that he is comfortable to teach. In other words, right, I joined the program and was assigned to teach pharmacoeconomics. So definitely was something that I was reasonably comfortable with to start with. But hey, if I would have been assigned biochemistry that I took myself as a student back in a long time ago, maybe that wouldn't be quite easy despite strong public speaking skills because the biochemistry is pretty far away from current area of expertise that I have. So if the subject matter that you are teaching is something that you are well versed in, then definitely it would be an easy job to get started. But as you go along as a young faculty, obviously keeping up, right, with practical knowledge in the field that it gets updated, right? Going to practical conferences in our field is something like American Pharmacists Association meeting, where it does have a small research component, but also a more practitioner-focused component. Helps you to bring and enrich your lectures and activities in class with applied content. So, and that creates, hey, why I'm learning this? Well, it is applicable to my future profession and it's current. So that way becomes, again, more effective delivery of information as well as the desire of students to master that information.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Practical knowledge in the field and being open to getting updates and staying relevant in your field, because knowledge is it keeps getting updated every day. You don't want to be that professor that your slides are like 10 years old. Like for my course, I can't even get away with it. With public health, everything changes on the second. So he's able to I get very excited having to show students, last year we couldn't even talk about this, but now we're talking about this. Thanks for that reminder. As we wind down, I had some, loose questions to kind of tie our loose ends. So we've talked about just who you are, an educator, an avid reader, and so now let's talk about preserving cultural identities. I feel like it's a subject that is both expansive and intimately personal. So being Russian American and knowing that cultural identities are a very vital aspect of our life. And sometimes that can be susceptible to erosion amidst, immigration, work dynamics. What have you done, would you say, so far in all of your years of living in the US? How have you been able to preserve your cultural identity, especially coming from where you come from? I've yet to meet a Russian who wasn't proudly Russian, right? So what would you say are the things you've been able to do to preserve those cultural identities amidst the rhetorics that is surrounding your country in the global power domination, across the US and beyond its shores as well?
I guess, a small correction here, because I don't think I ever, changed my identity, given that the time I started graduate studies, I was 25. So the identity formation, I believe, has been already over. So I consider myself a Russian than anyone else. And my main focus, obviously, with becoming a parent, is instilling the identity that I have into the child, and that has been my main motivation with making sure that obviously my identity is is Russian. It's making that very identity from the child, and I think the keys to that are simple, right? The language and the culture, which mostly can be transferred with being in the culture that we're traveling back, has been very instrumental for my daughter to understand the culture better, but also reading. So overnight, before going to bed, we have a ritual where first she reads me a few pages, obviously only Russian books predominantly, and then I read her another 10 to 15 minutes of another type of story, also in Russian. And at home we only speak Russian, so not switching to any other language. And obviously my mom, her grandma is important from, when calling her and interacting, and she tries to also read and hear my child reading to her. So those are, the basic things that are possible, right, for someone living away from the cultural environment to still maintain the culture if there is such a motivation. But for me, it's not even a question, right? I was intending from the very beginning to nurture, right, that identity, and as much as possible to have my daughter also see that she's Russian. And I think the tools are very simple, right? So the language and the culture, but culture is slightly more difficult given that the upbringing could be happening outside of cultural environment, but it can be partially at least recreated with those extra efforts.
You said the tools are easier. Natasha, no, it's not, especially now neck of the woods. So one of the things I know you did so well was, like you mentioned, teaching your child, like, your language. And she even speaks more than one language, which is already amazing enough. But it's also it wasn't just the language, it's also imbibing them in the other cultural aspect, like the literature, and being able to, converse and interact and even visit, Russia. I think that's really amazing. One thing I've observed... Oh, sorry, go ahead. You go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say that one thing I observed having, a child is it is so difficult. Like, you have to be super consistent. Almost like tell yourself, this is what I'm going to do and I'm not going to break it. And so myself and Taiwo, we don't even speak Yoruba constantly at home, which was the biggest problem. Like, we only speak it when we want to gossip, And if we're living in Nigeria, in school, interactions with the lunch lady, playground, she'll pick up Yoruba so quick. But because we don't even set that examples for her, it's like, forget about it. And then I tried with Yoruba literature, she knew the body parts for a bit, but I wasn't super consistent. And I just abandoned the project. So when you say it's easy, I'm like, no, it's not, Natasha, but I really admire what you've done with your daughter.
Can you correct a little bit? In Nigeria, both languages are common. Is it 50-50 distribution when you get out on the street of Lagos? Do you hear English and Yoruba with equal probability?
No. It depends on what part. And now with things going, so it depends on where you live, one. And Lagos is like New York City. It's a no man's land, they say, right? But it's still closer to the Yoruba-speaking parts, like the southwest region of the country, right? And so you will hear more English and broken English, and it depends on what part of the state you're growing in. But now with people trying to feel very Western, in fact, growing up in schools, you were not even allowed to speak other languages apart from English. They call it vernacular language, and you could get into trouble for speaking any other language apart from English in school growing up, which was very wrong.
Yeah, but I feel like Tolani here is really, contextual difference. This is, history and colonization and presence of the foreign language. Thankfully, right, my country wasn't affected by that, and predominant language, let's say 99% in any city, and probably, 99.9 in most cities except Moscow is the one language that is dominant. So that's, a slightly different setup where it's if Nigeria would have been not having a history it has, I think it might have been different for you to be consistent, right? So that you're going to compare it directly and say that, hey, I'm not maintaining it because it's difficult. You're not maintaining it because that cultural context in Nigeria is quite different.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. But I mean, what you just shared is, I think this is quite encouraging, especially to parents who might find themselves in similar situations. It's possible to do this, to get this done. You just have to be very, very consistent and exposing your child to those different sources of media. Because I think it's amazing that you did it by yourself, and you live in a part of the US that is not super diverse, which I think is the most amazing part of it. So kudos to you, Natasha. That's all I'm trying to say.
Thank you. No, I think it's again, obviously it's a personal motivation, and I just, it's an effort to speak in English for me, right? And it's no effort to speak Russian. So why would I be putting an effort when I can be not putting an effort, right? So that's the point, right? So obviously, I have not been growing up hearing English anywhere, and so it's not natural, right? Versus, someone growing up in Nigeria has been naturally speaking English. That's I think a driving factor.
Okay, got it. Thank you for sharing that. Now, as we wind down, I'm just curious to know, what do you think the future is going to look like as far as trends in public education, post-secondary education, considering the evolving global landscape? So we've touched a little bit on AI, on student motivation, and higher order thinking. What do you think is going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years?
I will be considering myself a futurist, right? And such a, important person to speak about it. Well, I think just like the trends we've been observing through the decades, right? I have some colleagues at the university who have been around for, longer than myself, let's say 15 to 20 years longer. And they were saying that when VHS tapes came over, right? You remember VHS tapes, like the video?
Yes.
Cassettes, right? So they were thinking that it will affect education. Now suddenly the faculty will become obsolete because you have a VHS tape recorded and anyone can learn anything, right? And then internet appeared, and then the same hoopla was coming along. Hey, you can, type in a search engine any type of request, and you get the learning happening right there. Then we had massive open online courses come into play in 2010s or so, where Coursera and edX were offering you the best world-class education from Ivy League and top universities of the world, and you can, learn whatever you want, right, for free or for a fraction of the cost. Yet the completion rate for those massive open online courses is roughly 4%, right? 96% never finish. And I feel like the same hoopla we are observing now is sort of another reincarnation of the same thing, right? Large language models now suddenly, going to substitute faculty and teachers. But I feel like it's now already known, right? It's unlikely, right, that human presence, human contact will remain. Will there be changes with regards to reducing number of faculty to save on costs for some universities, right, and transitioning to perhaps asynchronous instruction, pre-recorded? It is a potential, right? More from an economic standpoint, but if you're able to afford it, right, it's most likely, right, you'll be seeking an education with a human, no matter what, right? No matter all the opportunities to learn anything with just a fee you pay for your internet access.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, those are really great words to live by. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking about just what you've done so far, your passion being an educator, and cultural values, and how you've been able to preserve them through your own exploit and that of your child as well. And thank you so much. It has been nice to catch up with you again.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. All right, everyone. That was the episode with Dr. Natalia Shcherbakova. If you have any thoughts on this episode, don't forget to hit the comments and just leave us a message or two. We hope to keep having just natural conversations like this. I think a little bit of my professor hat came on today. I had to get a chance to really talk about, my work in the classroom. As you can tell, that we're very passionate about, especially student motivation and helping them achieve their goals. So if you're a student listening to this, just want to keep encouraging you to keep finding ways to expand those higher level thinking. It makes your professors really, really happy. All right. And what's our happiness relative to yours? In any event, this has been the More Sibyl Podcast. Catch you all on another episode of the podcast. And thank you once again, Natasha. We'll let you know when the episode comes out.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. Have a wonderful break. Bye. Everyone. Yeah.
Bye.